And he loved the creation. He loved the Lord with all his heart. And
Francis of Assisi. Yeah, a lot of people look toward him as an example. Yeah, okay.
So I ended up getting involved in that, and we moved to Maryland and lived on the... We were living in Maryland when he was going to school, but we were in this 3-story historic building, beautiful house, with all the right furnishings, the antiques, 5 different woods in the kitchen, a fireplace in the kitchen, and the original floors from the turn of the century. And it didn't feel right. My life was just taken up with clothing and cooking and how I looked and how he looked. And we were going to a stylish church in Washington, D.C., and the pastor and his wife were calling us into the inner circle. We were very popular. But something just didn't feel right inside. Yeah. And I was looking for something more radical. And my husband picked up a book at the library by John Michael Talbot about his conversion to the Catholic faith. And I thought, well, those people are all idol worshippers,
John Michael Talbot, singer-songwriter, right? Right.
Right. And I listened to his music, and it really spoke to my heart. The roughness of that calling and the primitive church calling. I got quite involved in that. Cultivated a much deeper relationship with the Lord, and really did give up my social idols, clothing and food and oppressing people and society and all of that.
You showed me a picture of a lady in a bathroom. Had something to do with the toilet.
Oh, yeah.
the swirly deal,
Yeah.
What was that about?
It was a magazine cover. When we were in Annapolis, Maryland, in this historic house, it was a magazine cover. Keith Green. It was one of his magazines.
Oh.
And it was yellow. And they had this woman in the kitchen, and she was being sucked down in a vortex, sucked down in her kitchen. There were so many things going on in her life that she was just being devoured by it.
Yeah.
All these activities in her life, And I can't remember what the issue of the magazine was like, but I saw that picture and I thought, that's me. That's who I am. And who I've become, who I've allowed myself to become. And it was right after that book came in the drawer, and I read it, and I thought, I want something deeper and more primitive. And he seems to have what I want.
Yeah. Well, Keith Green, another singer-songwriter who's gone on to be with the Lord, I remember their discipleship community there in East Texas. It started in California, and a phenomenal life story. If you ever get a chance to take a look at it on YouTube or whatever, the Keith Green story, really real moving. Yeah, a neat guy, and they did put out a magazine, a community newsletter, kind of, but yeah, quite a man, quite a life. Somewhere down the line, you go from this historic 3-story house in Annapolis to a very different situation, living-wise.
Yeah, his parents were supporting us because he was going to the University of Maryland.
They must have really come from some money,
the School of Public Affairs, and he wanted to do something good in the world too, and this was his choice, but he wasn't able to keep up with the class. He had one professor somehow that he clashed with, and he got a bad mark, and that caused him to be put on probation or to be turned out of the school, really. And at that time, I was longing for a much simpler life. Like I thought, gee, a farmhouse, a place where we can live a simple life with our children and, have a prayer life and, something more organic. But what happened when I read John Michael's story is we ended up going to a community in Pennsylvania, not that far away from where we were, and for a short time became a part of that community. I sold everything, we sold everything, all the antiques, all the things that I had embroidered and quilted, and the house was really done almost to museum quality.
Wow.
And I just had a huge sale. We sold everything. We took off for the Poconos. We found a place, a tar paper shack, on the side of a mountain. I just had my fourth child.
A tar paper shack.
Tar paper shack. It was like a summer cabin for somebody.
Wow.
It was not a
How
living.
many kids at this point?
4. Yeah.
Just had another baby.
The first, yeah, he was 3 months old when we moved there.
Boy, that was a radical move, huh?
Very radical.
I bet the family just was jumping up and down about that.
My mother was livid. His parents were disgusted.
Oh boy, first the station wagon, now this.
And we still had the station wagon.
Oh, that's right. That's right. You made their right decision there, but
no.
The Lord called again, didn't He?
He did.
Got you up there in the Poconos.
I mean, it was a complete renunciation of a superficial life that I wrote about it in. I can't remember. I wrote something about it, and I said I was a sorter of rags and a taster of brews, like brews, like cooking.
Wow.
Because I spent so much time on my appearance and the children's appearance and his appearance and the food. And that's where my time went. It wasn't in prayer. It wasn't in helping people. It wasn't in serving. It wasn't in witnessing. It was in feathering my own nest and measuring up to the middle class standard in the Washington.
Boy, if we'd only admit it, in the Christian community and in the church, there are a lot of us that are kind of going along like that and feel like, well, we're blessed, the Lord's blessing us and prospering us and whatever. But, it constantly is a challenge to me that what part of me is going out? What am I doing? Am I bearing fruit for the Lord? If He comes to my tree looking for fruit, what's He going to find?
Right.
And what am I doing for others? Like, I got to tell you, Mother Teresa was a real powerful example for me in my life.
Ouch.
And and just the way she and her sisters gave everything, lived with the poorest of the poor in Calcutta, and went on that way they're still going on, I guess. And other people who've worked in inner city ministries and things like that. Thank God for some examples out there that challenge us that there's more to it than just prosperity. I mean, is that really should we really be pushing, on the prosperity thing so much?
Well, that's a good question. And in fact, I did a 5-part series on worldliness in the church, because this experience that I had on the side of the mountain in the Pocono Mountains with my family, everything was so tight and intimate and sweet, and the Lord was 100% of my life, and Him directing me on how to raise my children and take care of my husband. My life was wrapped around the Lord's agenda, and I could feel it. I could feel the purity and the cleanliness of it. And
He took care of all your needs too. Something about being in a hurricane and a couple of electric wires.
Yeah, there was a Hurricane Gloria hit New York City, and I happened to be alone that night. A friend was watching the children, and I was having prayer time. My husband was at work at a nursing home, and I was having my prayer time, and the hurricane hit. And I was beseeching the Lord to please show us how He wanted us to serve Him. With all my heart and soul, I was begging Him. And, Hurricane Gloria, that just, the perfect title for what I was going through. I was really reaching into the Lord's glory and asking Him, to transform our lives.
Yeah.
And right around that time, the electricity goes off. But then it went back on again. And about 2 hours later, these workers from the electric company show up out there, and they said, "You have electricity. Do you know that the electricity is out for miles around? You are the only person with electricity."
How How'd that happen?
Well, apparently the Lord had allowed the wires to be severed, but they fell into a puddle of water, so they maintained their connection.
So, what do I do with my life, Lord? What should we do? And one of the
Yeah.
first things he says is, well, you take care of my business, I'll take care of yours, right? I will
Yeah.
provide. I will
It was
take
beautiful.
care.
But I discovered that there are, in every denomination, that there are holy people and people that love the Lord and that know the Lord intimately. Because I checked out a few other denominations when we were in Annapolis and went to church there. But anyway, I went to a couple different churches there, and I discovered that there are beautiful, committed people in love with the Lord, giving their lives to the Lord in every church that I went to. And the Catholic Church was not the only church. But
Yeah.
what I discovered was really clarified in that situation. The simplicity of that lifestyle made so much more room for the Lord. I'd never trade that. I would never trade that or go back to it.
Yeah. Yeah, you find a few earthy Christians here and there, homeschoolers and others that have just said, not that everyone needs or can or should get off the grid, but it's kind of neat when the Lord gives you an opportunity to just kind of really and truly take nothing for the journey. And we'll probably talk a little more about that tomorrow. But, I'd asked the question earlier, should we be pushing the prosperity thing? I know that's is and can be controversial, but it just, the Lord didn't mince words when he talked about you can't serve two masters.
Right. I mean, I sought that. I sought the answers to that, and my experience really clarified a lot because my relationship with the Lord was so much more intimate. But getting into much more intimate than it had ever been. And you can't outgive the Lord.
I was just going to say, can you outgive him?
you give him everything that supposedly means something to you, but actually you're entrapped by those things.
Yeah.
You give him all those things that are entrapping you, and he turns around and gives you himself.
He takes the things of us that we could never keep to give to us things that we could never lose, right?
That's right.
So you did some mountain time there, and when you and I met, actually, was in a mountain range, the Ozark Mountains, right?
Right.
Northern Arkansas, southern Missouri.
One of my early experiences, even as an evangelical in my first church, was going around on Christmas morning and taking 200 sandwiches and coffee to the homeless people. And the spirit about doing that was so sweet. I really saw the Lord was in that. And so I dedicated my life to serving the poor.
200 sandwiches. You make them yourself?
No, McDonald's.
You bought 200 sandwiches from McDonald's?
No, they donated them.
Oh, wow. You asked?
Yeah, I asked.
Man, that's gutsy.
They donated them, and
wow, that's
I
awesome.
distributed them
That
with
is
coffee
so
and
cool.
everything. And but that was the direction that I was headed. We came back to Phoenix, and my husband left me. He didn't want that kind of a journey. He wanted to be an artist in the world and have an art gallery, and it was just a whole other agenda. And we were immature when we met and got married. It's like so many other people.
I think of the wedding vows so many times. Being a pastor myself, an ordained minister, and over the time thinking, gosh, what God has joined together, let no man put asunder.
Right.
And yet I meet so many couples in so many situations that God did not join together.
No.
Now, this is not a carte blanche thing to say, okay, you can use this as an excuse and you can get a divorce. God hates divorce. But a lot of us didn't have a clue, not only about marriage, we didn't know the Lord, we didn't know anything.
Yeah.
Or one party knows the Lord, And I tell young people all the time, especially young girls, I'm going to change him. This, that, and the other. And they make themselves up to look like the girls on TV. If the guys after that, then when somebody else comes along that looks like the girl on TV too, what's
and
he
you're
gonna?
fat and pregnant.
Yeah. When you got the uglies or whatever.
Yeah.
But I try to tell these young men and young women alike, if you find someone who loves God, they will always love you. If they're faithful to God,
Yeah.
they'll always be faithful to you. Wouldn't you agree?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
And that's what happened after he left. I didn't date. I didn't do anything for 5 years. All I did was seek the Lord's will and obey him. And I felt this unction to move to the Ozark Mountains, where John Michael's community was, but not to be a part of their community. I already had an inner witness that wasn't right for me and for the children. But to move to the Ozarks and to serve the poor, the hill people. And that's what I did.
Ozark hillbillies.
And then I met you in church.
Yeah. I remember that. I thought, golly, who's this Earth Mother looking lady with these 4 little kids, little stair-step buggers? And we knew each other for about a year and a half as friends. And
Right.
I figured I'd be an old monk on a mountain. I'd lived in some monasteries and worked in some missions. But you'll hear a little more of my story later. It's really sweet. And
Oh, it is.
even though I'm a guy, real men get mushy too. So, but you continued on, or we continued on afterwards.
Well, I would like to say one thing, and that's that I had several beautiful experiences with the Lord where I was his bride.
Wow.
And
yeah, that impressed me. I wanted more of that in my life.
I wore a wedding ring on my finger because I was his bride. I belonged totally to him, and I would not have anything to do with anyone as far as even considering them for marriage unless they were also the Lord's bride, and I knew the Lord had brought us together. Yeah. So the beautiful experiences and the intimacy with him, seeing him, having him talk to me. Because I remember just before we left the Poconos and came back to Arizona where his parents were, I was lying on my side with my elbow up and my hand on my chin on the floor, and I saw the Lord clearly in the Spirit directly across from me doing the exact same thing. And he said, "How much are you willing to give for me? What are you willing to give up for me?"
Really?
Huh. Yeah, he said that. And
That's
I said,
"Please."
I said, "Please don't take my children."
Wow.
And right after that, he separated my former husband and I. He did it. It was his act.
He knew that was coming. Yeah. Golly,
But my relationship with him continued to deepen, and I've known that I was his bride. I have not been faithful to that calling.
I was going to say, you talk about this intimacy with the Lord, hearing from him, seeing him and that. Well, can't you do that just couldn't you have done that in Annapolis and you could go to conferences, right? And church activities and be parts of groups and get all that.
Once in a while I'd go to a big gathering like that, and I might have a fleeting experience with the Lord, but the profound connection comes in seclusion. I'll speak to her in the desert. I'll lead her into the desert, and I'll speak to her heart.
Yeah.
And it's
quiet and alone.
That time totally dedicated to him, and cutting away, circumcising my heart from the frills of the world, which took up so much of my attention and my time, and my children, simplifying things down to only what was necessary.
I'm sure that we'll talk about, prayer and things like that more in future programs, but I got to tell you, one of the biggest challenges to me, even when I also sold everything I had. We didn't even know each other for years before. Had very much the same type of call and experience. I could not get quiet. I could shut my mouth and I could almost turn my heart off sometimes. But I couldn't turn my mind off. You know,
Yeah.
tick, 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 or I'd get distracted. Or I'd yawn or I'd fall asleep. And I thought, wow, Lord, have I spent time with you? But it seemed like the more, maybe it would have been 20 minutes one day. There are times when I'll sit down with the Lord now and the sun will come up the next morning. It seems like I've been there a couple hours. But I'm 55 years old now, you know. That was, I was younger and
I used music a great deal. And that would transport a holy music, you know,
Yeah.
worship.
yeah.
I would get into worship and the Lord would just step into the worship and take over.
Wow.
And I'm gonna be sharing on that. We'll share on that in the future because that kind of intimacy is, the Lord is no respecter of persons. Anyone who is willing to give up their time and their attention and their lives to the Lord is open to that kind of relationship with Him. But I'd like to share some of the ways that He led me into that intimacy.
Sure.
And how He confirms out of the mouth of two or three a certain direction, because we don't always make the right choices with our lives.
Right.
So another time.
Yeah, that's a subject for. Well, thank you for being so open and transparent tonight, and I'm sure there'll be more. But
I look forward to your interview.
yeah, I've got a little list to make, don't I?
Oh, you have a wonderful story.
Yeah.
Just wonderful.
Well, God willing, we'll see you next time and hear from you and speak to you. Hope to hear from you here on Heaven Talk, Dreams, Visions, comment, and discussion on all things heaven.